Welcome, everyone, to the Player Prop Happy Hour presented by the 33rd Team. It is week 7. For those of you that are new to the show, welcome in. Myself, Josh Larky, our data scientist, Ben Wolby, and our associate director of fantasy and betting, Ryan Reynolds, will each bring 3 player prop bets to the table, just like we do each and every week. We will share the prop bet, the best odds that we could find, which sports book that was on, along with the reasoning behind the play. We keep it short and simple, and hopefully we can all make a little bit of money in week 7. Ryan, your first play of the week.
I'm going to start us off with Davante Adams over 68.5 yards receiving at BetMGM at -115. He beat this in 3 of his first 4 games, was off by 3 yards in the 1 loss. During that stretch, Adams had at least 8 targets a game, 50 overall during that entire stretch. He's done very little over the last 2 weeks, which means he's a regression play, and you gentlemen know I like regression plays. To the point Adams actually publicly complained this week. The squeaky wheel gets the grease this week against the Bears. Eddie Jackson's injured a little bit. Well, if he plays, he's playing at a little deficit. If he sits out, that changes what the Bears secondary can do. Brian Hoyer, we talked about this on our show yesterday, Josh. Backup quarterbacks tend to target wide receiver ones at a greater clip. So I like Adams in this matchup. Think he can hit this pretty comfortably.
I like that play too. Ben, your first pick of the day.
I'm going to take Mark Andrews over 4.5 receptions, -102 on FanDuel. He's over this line in 3 of 5, and in the 2 that he missed, he had 4 receptions, super close. That's got to count for something. And while only 2 tight ends have gone over this number against the Lions, they've allowed the 3rd most receptions to the tight end position. And we've seen tight ends have some of their best games of the season against them. We saw Noah Fant, who was averaging 2 receptions per game, have 4 against Detroit. Kyle Pitts was averaging 3.5. He had 5. Josiah DeGuardia had 2 total receptions on the season, but had 4 in his game against the Lions. And Andrews is averaging 4.8 receptions per game. He's averaging 33 routes per game. And tight ends against the Lions are getting targeted on 21% of the routes. 21% of 33 is 7 targets. And he is 30 and 15 over in games with 7 targets. The only concern, the big concern, is the weather. But according to True Media, we don't see a decrease in the number of quarterback completions or tight end receptions until the wind speed reaches about 20 miles per hour. According to weather.com, not quite going to get that high. So I'm going to take this Mark Andrews over 4.5 receptions.
Ben Wolby's a man of many talents. He's a data scientist by trade. He's a meteorologist at night. We love the insights that he brings to us each and every week. And if you like his work, you can follow him on Twitter at Ben Wolby. His projections, along with his thoughts and intuition and data that backs up the projections, you can read that every single week. It's free on the33rdteam.com. Ryan is Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter, the better Ryan Reynolds, as I like to call him. He has his expert picks and predictions for every game that hit the site yesterday. And then tomorrow he'll let you know exactly what he's betting on in each and every game that comes out on Saturdays. For my first prop of the day, I'm going to be taking Isaiah Pacheco over 14.5 rush attempts, -110 on BetMGM. The line's already moved up to 15.5 on FanDuel. DraftKings has been stubborn. They will probably move it up as well at some point. Pacheco has at least 15 carries in 4 straight games. He's really taken over a total workhorse, borderline bell cow role for the Chiefs. In these past 4 games, he's actually averaging 17 carries a game in that stretch. The Chiefs are 5.5-point favorites against the Chargers. These games are usually pretty close between the two, but very rarely has it ever really been a blowout, one end or the other. So I expect game script to be pretty favorable the entire time for Pacheco to make it 5 straight games with at least 15 carries. Ryan, your second prop of the day.
Going to go Brandon AIyuk over 65.5 yards at BetMGM at -120. He's beaten this number in 3 of his 5 games. Catch rate was low in 3 of the last 4 games. He dropped 50 yards of production against Cleveland last week. So again, gentlemen, a little bit of regression in the mix here. Narrow target tree with Christian McCaffrey banged up and Deebo Samuel banged up. Vikings give up the 3rd most yards to wide receivers. They're struggling on the perimeter specifically. AIyuk has played 194 snaps on the perimeter, 36 in the slot. My primary concern here is Brian Flores is capable of opponent-specific game plans. And AIyuk's he's not the only game in town with George Kittle in San Francisco, but he's close. And to top this off, I asked Jordan Vanek if he liked this. We're pretty much eye to eye across the board here. So whenever me and Jordan are aligned, it bumps my confidence up a little bit.
We like that one too. One thing we also like is Underdog Fantasy. If you're new, sign up. Promo code 33rd. You get 100% deposit match up to $100. They have super fun fantasy games like Pick'em. I know everyone out there likes best ball. They had their best ball resurrection tournament. That was weeks 6 through 17. And you might go, oh my God, I missed best ball resurrection. Can I play best ball again this year? Yes. Every single week they have a battle royale contest. And that right there is sort of a snake draft for DFS. And then best ball wise, probably like week 15, it'll open. They'll have NFL playoff best ball. That's some of the most fun stuff out there. Things like the gauntlet bring back a lot of fond memories for many of us, myself included. I know Ryan's played that a lot as well. So head over to Underdog Fantasy, promo code 33rd, 33RD, as Ben likes to say. Get that 100% deposit match up to $100. Speaking of Ben, what is your second pick of the day?
Russell Wilson over 29.5 pass attempts versus Green Bay. The only team with fewer than 30 pass attempts versus Green Bay was Detroit. Jared Goff had 28 attempts in what was a blowout. If you recall, that was the game David Montgomery had 32 carries. Don't quite think we're going to see that happen with Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine, and Javonte Williams. And the only two games where Russell Wilson didn't top this number, they ran their two fewest total plays in those weeks, 33 and 30, while they're averaging 40 plays per game otherwise. And teams against Green Bay are averaging a very nice 69 plays per game. That is the third highest. And Denver has a particularly soft secondary, rather. They're allowing the most plays of 20 or more yards. Jordan Love said, quote unquote, that the last game left a bad taste in his mouth after losing to the Raiders. And I could see Green Bay getting up early, making some big splash plays, and then Denver playing from behind.
I like that play as well, guys. Ben's projections are on the site. They're free. They're also in my fantasy rankings, which are on the 33rdteam.com. So you can get my rankings, Kev Wheeler's rankings, Matthew Hill's rankings, all averaged and aggregated. So you can see where we're viewing each player. I've also got my rest of season rankings and trade value chart up on the site. And new this week is a downloadable, just a really gorgeous color-coded PDF for that trade value chart as well. And if you want more of Ben Wolby, he has a show that he does with Alex Caruso on Wednesdays, Fifth Down Fantasy. It's over 10,000 views on Twitter each of the past 3 weeks. Make sure you check that one out. For my second play of the day, though, we are just going to keep piling on to this Denver Packers game. I was trying to find which angle I liked best. Ultimately, I don't see how the Packers, like Ben said, don't get up early, don't score a lot of points, don't have. I think they're just going to have a lot of success on offense. So I'll take Jordan Love over 235.5 passing yards, minus 114 on FanDuel. He's been over this number already in 3 of 5 games. Quarterbacks against Denver are over this number in 4 of 6 games. The two who weren't were Jimmy Garoppolo. That was in week 1. I think we all know what we think of Jimmy Garoppolo, and then Zach Wilson, who has only hit this number once in 6 games, and it's also Zach Wilson. Denver's allowing a league high 8.8 yards per pass attempt to opposing quarterbacks. The Packers are coming off their bye. They're fresh. It's also the first game all year that the entire skill group will play together in a healthy capacity. So I'm just going to go with the man that leads that group in Jordan Love. Ryan, let's stick with this game one more time. What is your third and final pick of the day?
I'm going to go with Jerry Jeudy over 45.5 receiving yards at minus 115 on DraftKings. He's beat this in 3 of 5 games. Has between 5 and 7 targets in every game, so his role is at least stable, if not, a little underwhelming, if we're being honest. Broncos are a mess in general, like we said yesterday. Josh, sell everyone after this week. I hope that's what they do. That said, this game has some shootout potential, as you gentlemen see too. Packers quarterbacks Eric Stokes is out. Jari Alexander and Darnell Savage are questionable. That means Green Bay could be down their 3 best secondary players in here. 45.5 yards is a very beatable number, especially for a guy who was trashed by Steve Smith on national television last week. I think he's going to be pretty motivated against Green Bay.
I think so too. Guys, nobody talks about football like Ryan Reynolds. He's watched every snap of every game since 2014 and still lives to tell about it, still lives to podcast 4 days a week, despite that busy film watching schedule. Give him a follow at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter and let him know how the other Ryan Reynolds soccer team is doing. He loves those DMs. Ben, your third and final prop of the day.
Desmond Ridder over 29.5 attempts. A guy who's averaging 33.8 attempts per game, 5 and 8 over this number, going against a team where quarterbacks have gone over in 4 of 5. They're 4 and 1. They're allowing the sixth most attempts per game, 10 more pass attempts than the NFL average. I feel like this line is just way too low. And over the past 3 weeks, Desmond Ridder, he's slowly been increasing his average depth of targeting his receivers a little bit downfield. I believe that they're doing that in a conscious effort to stretch the field and open up the run game. But here's the thing. Tampa Bay's DVOA is top 10. They have a better rush defense than they do pass defense. Teams have a slightly lower than average success rate when running, a slightly higher than average success rate when passing the ball. I do believe that that trend will continue. Desmond Ridder is just going to continue to pass the ball at the rate he's been doing it. And again, I just feel that this line is a bit too low considering how he's gone over it. The other team has allowed it, and they have a pretty good run defense. So my model suggests this over about 66% of the time. I will absolutely be taking it.
Like the sound of that one, guys. That is data scientist, meteorologist at Ben Wolby on Twitter. His show with Alex Caruso is on Wednesdays. For my third and final pick of the day, before we get to a bonus pick, I will take Jaxon Smith-Njigba over 3.5 receptions, plus 110 on BetMGM. He's only been over this number in 2 of 5 games, but the usage is getting better. It's ticking up. He's a round 1 rookie receiver. That's what we should be expecting. He ran as many routes as DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett last week. That was the first time all season. He has at least 5 targets in 4 or 5 games. The Cardinals are giving up the 6th most receptions per game to wide receivers, a little bit over 15. There have already been 12 receivers with at least 4 catches against Arizona already. That's 2 per game that are hitting that number. And 3 of the 6 games the Cardinals have played were against the Giants. We don't really love that receiving core necessarily. The Commanders, that's the Commanders. We don't really love what we've seen on offense in the past game. And then the 49ers in a week where Debo had rib and knee injuries and was simply used as a decoy and was never targeted and never really looked like he expected to be targeted. Before this bonus pick, a couple reminders. Ryan's Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter. Ben is Ben Wolby on Twitter. You can find me at Larky Tweets. I've got my fantasy rankings, rest of season rankings, trade value chart. It's all on the 33rdteam.com. Ben's projections are up on the site. Ryan's expert picks and predictions came out yesterday for every game. And he's going to let you know exactly what he's betting on in each game tomorrow. And he also has a few island game previews out. One in particular I'm going to be reading was that Sunday Night Football one, the juicy matchup where the Dolphins are traveling to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. That looks like the shootout of the week. Now, for a little bonus play. Speaking of the Giants, the Commanders, I found that BetMGM has some interesting wide receiver head-to-head lines, and one of them didn't make sense. I am going to be taking Darius Slayton to have more receiving yards than Jahan Dotson in that game at minus 105 on BetMGM. Let's look at Dotson. 5.2 targets a game, 42 air yards a game. He's going 8 yards downfield for the average target, and he's getting 23 receiving yards a game. That's bad. Slayton, not 5.2 targets, 5 targets a game. He only has 1 fewer target on the season, basically the same. But the air yards are not 42. It's 69. Nice. That's an average depth of target of nearly 14 yards instead of 8. And he's not averaging 23 yards a game like Dotson. He's averaging 39. And then when we look at the matchups, the Commanders defense has allowed 41 more receiving yards per game to wide receivers than the Giants defense. And then on top of that, I think we all saw that clip at this point where Jahan Dotson was actually holding kicks in practice. I have no idea what's going on. He didn't catch a pass last week. I don't know if he's in the doghouse, if he's just not doing well. But you do not love seeing a guy holding kicks after a really, really rough game. It's actually been a 6-game stretch now where he is just simply underwhelmed. And I'm going to bet on that trend continuing when Jahan Dotson's much more heavily favored in that market. And I think it should be the opposite. Folks, from myself, Josh Larky, from our data scientist, meteorologist, Ben Wolby, from our associate director of fantasy and betting, Ryan Reynolds, from the 33rd team, from our sponsor Underdog Fantasy promo code 33rd. Thank you, everyone.